Hello, this is Nadia from She Builds Again, and I am coming to you from a very rainy day outside in Bali, Indonesia. It is still rainy season here. It's about rainy season for half of the year and then dry season for the other half. And it's actually been sunny in the last week, but today it got gray and cloudy again, and it's raining, and so we're just embracing the indoor weather and having this time to reflect. It kind of matches with the vibe, I think. So for those of you who don't know me, I was 35 years old when I moved to Bali, Indonesia with my family, my husband, our son, and we had our second child here in Bali. And so we are now a family of four. And what I talk about, at least in the recent weeks, has been a lot about the highs and lows and navigating relocation with a family. And it's been challenging. There have been lots of lessons, but we have continued to try to balance everyone's needs so that we are all taking care of all of the members of our family. So I actually felt that there was a topic that I really wanted to talk about today, and it was why I decided to write my own story. And I'm going to share with you a little bit of my journey in this video. And I'm also going to share with you some actionable tips if you are trying to write your own story yourself. And so I'm going to start with sharing my story. And so I started my career in journalism. I always excelled in English. I always loved writing. And I decided to study professional writing in university. I went to university in Toronto for a couple of years and then moved to the UK for a few years at the end. And I interned my entire time at university at this newspaper, the national newspaper, the main newspaper, which has been standing for the longest period of time, which is called the Royal Gazette in Bermuda. And so I interned there for a few years in college, maybe my whole 4 or 5 years. And then after that, I was hired full-time as a trainee reporter. And I definitely dealt with some ups and downs once I became full-time, because I realized once I got more serious stories that I was covering, like court reporting, that it was very draining. But I'll talk more so from the perspective of when I shift to become a lifestyle journalist. And in that period, I was writing and interviewing very, very interesting, fascinating people, and people that were having events and raising money and traveling the world and retiring early, and music artists, people who were painters, painters. And I just had this opportunity to interview a whole gamut of people, from people that were well known in Bermuda or people that just had interesting stories to tell in Bermuda, to even some small international artists. I remember there was a royal family from Serbia that had come to Bermuda, and my dad was half Serbian, and so I was very interested to meet them. But all that to say, I got to a point in my life where I didn't want to just be reporting and an observer. I wanted to write my own story. I wanted to live a life that was just so inspiring to the people that were looking at it. I wanted to overcome my challenges. I wanted to learn my lessons. I wanted to not make the same mistakes. I wanted to really have adventures and just incredible stories to tell. I don't know who I'm going to tell these to, but that was just a desire of my heart from early on in my 20s, in my mid-20s. And so I remember when I was a journalist in the lifestyle section that I was getting to share all these incredible stories. But after I was finished getting my deadlines in, I was scrolling the internet, I was scrolling Facebook, partly for entertainment, but also partly for research, because you always obviously have to stay up to date with what's happening in the community and the people that are in your circle, and find out if there's any interesting stories to tell. I would always find cool people within my friends groups or social group that had, maybe they were traveling overseas for a conference, or they were just doing something interesting that could be newsworthy. And so I just spent so much time scrolling, and the stories that were always kind of making me jealous or envious, or I don't know what the word is, but they would kind of pull something inside my heart, were the stories of people who were relocating internationally, people that were having these adventures, people that were living this life that was so much less than ordinary, people who were looking at the status quo of life and that pattern that we're supposed to do, the getting married, having kids, commuting to work, working hard, staying in our cubicle, staying in our lane, retiring, people that went beyond that, what was expected of us, and actually started to get clear on what it is that they wanted and to just write these beautiful lives for themselves. And so I think that jealousy is a very big indicator, and it's a sign. And it's not something where you should feel guilty about it, or you should hate yourself for it, or hate the other person for it. I think it's more of, it's kind of like a combination of admiration and maybe fear that you cannot have what they have. And so I tried to look at it as a positive, that sense of yearning, that sense of jealousy, because it was telling me what I really wanted in this life. It was telling me what I was really, really desiring to move towards. And so it wasn't overnight. I shared the story of our relocation journey recently with a short little chat with my husband, but it was about a 10-year journey, to be honest, of from when we started dating, me and my husband. I was always sharing these stories online. I would send him stories of families that were traveling and people that were living in Mexico or Costa Rica or Portugal. And one of the places I really loved to hear the stories was CNBC Made It. I found those stories so inspiring because it shared a little bit of like the finances and how they made money, but also how they lived in different parts of the world and how much it cost. And so I would share all of these stories with him to kind of inspire him, to make him realize that it's possible for other people. It could be possible for us too. And eventually, around 10 years later, we finally decided to make the move to Bali, Indonesia for now. And so all that to say, I had to move from being someone who was writing about other people who were living interesting, fascinating, amazing, incredible lives, and decide that I wanted to live that for myself. I wanted to have incredible stories to tell and adventures to tell and lessons that I've learned and things that I pass on to other people, whether it's my kids or my friends or just people that care about me and care about the life that I've lived and the messages that I have to tell and the story that I have to tell. And so that's a little bit of my journey professionally. And after that, after I left my job as a journalist, I then became an entrepreneur. And anyone that has run their own business, become an entrepreneur, knows that you discover so much about yourself when you're working for yourself. You discover your weaknesses, your strengths, you discover your money mindset, you discover all of these things that maybe you had no idea about when you were just getting a 9-to-5 paycheck, right? And so I would say that that part of my journey as well, I worked for myself for about 8 years, was very exposing, very eye-opening, very sobering, because I learned so much about myself. I learned so many areas where I won awards for my business, which is incredible, but I had such imposter syndrome. I was like, who am I to win this? Like, I won the first award. I was given the first award right after having my son, and I was out technically on maternity leave. And I hadn't had so many things in my business figured out. I wasn't even making 6 figures, but I was making high, like I think in the 90s, 90,000 a year plus. And so all that to say, I learned so much about myself, my limited beliefs, the things that were holding me back from greater success and entrepreneurship. And I would say, especially if you're an entrepreneur and you're a Christian or a believer of some sort of faith, then it's gonna really expose areas where you lack faith and where you need to trust God more. And I'm grateful that I walked that journey with God, because He provided year after year after year. And I can honestly say, at least if I'm looking at the story of my life and the arc of my life, that when I started to distance myself from God and feel disappointed and let the bitterness set in my faith walk, is when I saw kind of his hand of provision lift off of me. And so it's been a very, very interesting journey, but also a very exciting journey. And I'm so grateful that I took that risk on myself and I started to believe that more was possible for my life, because it truly is. And so I don't think I would be here sitting here in our house, in our villa in Canggu, Bali, had I not decided to write my story myself. Another interesting part of my journey is that after I left my job as a journalist, finally, after about 7 years, it was 2016, and I had kind of like a fork in the road in my life. I was taking this PR certification, and I was also taking this coaching certification. And I took this sabbatical for 3 months, and I went traveling for a few months. I went to Israel, I went to Jordan, I went to Uganda and South Africa during those 3 months. And what I was really trying to clarify and decide was, should I go the way that my head says? My head says it would be realistic and safe to move from journalism into PR, because they are like complementary skill sets. But my heart had had this life-changing experience with coaching. I worked with my coach for the first time. I guess it must have been 2014, maybe 2015, probably 2015. I didn't even know what coaching was, but I just had heard of this woman who might be able to help me, and I asked her for some help, and then she told me about her coaching offerings, and I paid her some money, and she helped me for a few weeks. And it blew my mind how just someone sitting with you, holding space, giving you encouragement and accountability, and asking some important questions and giving you that space to sit with it, how it opens up a world of possibilities. Because before, I felt like I was stuck. I felt like I couldn't move. I felt like I wanted to leave my job as a journalist. I felt stuck. I felt like my boss was lovely. She's a great friend of mine, but how she managed me within the workplace, I felt like she was stifling my creativity and micromanaging me. And I just felt like I didn't have a voice. I didn't even recognize my stories once she was finished editing them. And that didn't feel good for my confidence. And I felt like I was stuck in that place. But through coaching, I realized that there are so many options available to us. They might not be easy options. They might require a risk. They might require us to leave an unhealthy situation, but we always have options. And so one of the things that I've since reminded myself of since that first coaching package and that coaching series that I did was, you are not a tree. You can always move. If you are not happy, you do not have to stay in an unhealthy environment or relationship or situation or job. You don't. So it just completely opened my eyes up to a world of possibility. And so going back to that fork in the road, I had that option to do the PR route or do the coaching route. And I went with the smart, safe choice, because that's kind of how I've been conditioned to live growing up, to be perfectly honest. Like, my mom has always had a corporate job, a corporate career. And even her, if you look at her story, she wasn't able to follow her heart and do what she wanted to do. She was a single mom and she was the breadwinner. And she provided so exceptionally well for us. She put us through private school and she hired a nanny for us when we were younger. And she took me and traveled with me and exposed me to like just luxury travel, because when I travel by myself, I do it like the backpacker style of way. But my mom always just allowed us to experience the most incredible experiences, whether we went to India or Thailand or Singapore. We just had the most incredible adventures together. And so I did what I knew and I chose that safe route. And yes, like I said, the blessing was that entrepreneurship also exposed many things. It was challenging, there were lessons, but there was something also that was pulling me with the coaching. I wanted to express that. I wanted to just share what I've learned with other people. I wanted to help people with those same powerful questions and support and accountability so that they could also live bigger lives and believe that more is possible for their life. And so all that to say, the coaching aspect, the one way that I was able to use it, there's a few ways that I was able to use it, but I was able to use those coaching skills that I learned through that certification through holding these goal setting workshops. And I would hold them almost every single year in January, the first week of January. I would gather women that were interested, that wanted to pay a small little fee, and we would sit down and we would work through this workbook, and we would pray and we would call on God, and we would just try to listen and have moments of quiet stillness. And then we would share, and then we would rejoice with each other and share what was on our hearts and share what we wanted to grow or build. And it was just beautiful to hear all these different women from all different ages sharing about what it is that they wanted to build and create with their lives. And what I think is so special and so important and so lovely is that through the tools that I learned through coaching, I used it in my business, I used it in my life, but I started to set goals. I started to really get clear on what it is that I wanted from my life. And I started to, like I said, write my own story. I started to use a technique that I call like visualization or even scripting. And you start to kind of imagine that you're 1 year into the future, and you actually get out a pen and paper, or you can do it on a laptop. I've done it so many times on both. And you imagine that you're 1 year from now, and you get clear on all of the details. You get clear on how do you feel, how do you look, how do you act, how do you dress, where are you? Are you in a different country? Are you in a different workplace? Are you in a different home? You get so clear on all of the details. You get clear on who you surround yourself with. You get clear on just how you feel waking up, how you feel going about your work, your day, your life, with your family, with your friends. And some of these activities have just been so powerful, and they've changed my life completely. I've also talked about like vision boarding and how I used to create vision boards, and I would put them as my phone wallpaper and my laptop wallpaper, and I would just see these beautiful images. And that's for sure what got me here where I am today, because it helped me to focus. It helped me to focus on our big savings goals when we were trying to relocate. And then it also helped me on the back end to imagine what life could be like, a slower life, a more rich, meaningful life, a life with self-care, a life with rest, a life with more enjoyment and friends that feel like family, friends that just see you and appreciate you and understand you. And so all that to say, I really do feel like once I decided to make that choice to write my own story and not just write and observe what was happening with everyone else, when I decided to get clear on what I wanted for my future and decide what success looked like to me, life started to change drastically. And I will say, just in terms of any helpful suggestions, I would really encourage you to do that activity right now. That scripting is so, so powerful. The way that I do it as a woman of faith is I actually write a letter to God sometimes. I've done it both ways, but sometimes what I would do at the beginning of the year is write this letter to God on a piece of paper, and I would start with, "Dear God." I would start the first paragraph with "Thank you. Thank you for the most brilliant year. Thank you for allowing me to face my fears. Thank you that even though things were so uncertain, you opened doors with my job, with my career, with my finances. Thank you that the money was pouring in and I was able to afford to travel with my family. Thank you so much, God, that you have just helped to quiet and still my thoughts so that I can really focus on you, that our relationship has grown, that I feel so much more in alignment with your will and your plan and your purpose for my life. Thank you, God, so much that you have surrounded me with the most incredible people, that you have opened doors for me to be inspired by people that are around me and realize that I am definitely not the smartest person in the room. And I get to learn from all of these amazing people who are so much more successful and have done incredible things with their lives. And I just think that this scripting activity, you can get as detailed as you want, like I said, but just start to thank God for all the things that he's going to do in the next year. And it will really blow your mind if you look back. But I would say, let me just give you a few tips before you do this exercise. I would say listen to some worship music if you're going to do it with the Dear God. Make sure that there's no distractions. Make sure that you have a quiet at least 10 to 15 minutes for this, maybe 20 minutes. Get a clean piece of paper or a fresh page on your laptop. Close all the other tabs so you can just focus and really channel in on what it is that God is trying to tell you. And then let it flow. Don't overthink. Don't second guess. Just let it flow from a space of what God is trying to tell you that he wants for you. And I think that this just works so well because you start to get into a state of flow, a state of alignment. And what I realize is that sometimes when I do it with the Dear God versus just the scripting of like my future self, which I also do sometimes, but with the Dear God exercise, I find that I'm writing different things because I'm not just writing down a bunch of things that I want. And I'm not just writing down a bunch of superficial things that I want to achieve or attain or become. I'm writing down deeper things. I'm writing down my relationships. I'm writing down how I feel. I'm writing down more so something that's in alignment with God's will. And that changes everything. When I look back on these Dear God journal entries that I have, I'm always amazed by what God has done. I'm always amazed that I can go through the list and almost every single thing on there he's done. And it just gives a sense of peace and a sense of calm. And I'm just so grateful that I started to do these activities at our workshops with the amazing women who attended. I'm so grateful for all of them who showed up because they were just my favorite thing. I really hope that next January I'm in a place where I can offer them again. But I'm just also trying to step in sync with God for the first time. Maybe not the first time, but for the first time in a long time, because I was just trying to hustle so much last year and I feel like I didn't get anywhere. And so I'm trying to do it from a different space. I'm trying to do it from a space of feminine energy. I'm trying to do it from a place of healing and alignment and faith and trust and surrender. And so yeah, I'll keep you posted if I decide to host those workshops next January because they are so powerful. We all get to share. There's just this buzz and this energy from the women and God's presence. Like he's always present with us, right? So he's definitely present in the midst of when we're gathered as women, as sisters. So I hope that I get to offer that next year and I'll keep you posted. Anyways, I really hope that if you are in a space in your life where you are observing other people, where you are scrolling on Instagram or Facebook or whatever platform you use, TikTok, and you are looking at other people's lives and you have that sense of jealousy or envy or even just feeling down about yourself, that you're not happy with where you are and you're not happy with your finances, your job, where you are, your environment, any of that, I want you to know that you can pick up the pen and literally start to write your own story. And for me, it was a mental choice that I was not going to be an observer in life, that I wanted to be an active participant, that I wanted to actually be proactive in creating a life that I loved. And so if you are in that position where you don't feel like you are where you want to be, you're not happy, you're not enjoying your daily habits and the things that you're getting to do, you don't have much fulfillment and purpose and meaning and excitement in your life, then I want you to know that that exercise is going to help you to get clear on what God has for you in the year ahead. And if you want to go a step further, do the other exercise that I mentioned and start to think about what your future self looks, feels like, acts like, because I think that that's another component that is maybe more so out of our selfish desires, but it gives you an indication of what you desire. Maybe it's fitness goals, maybe it's health goals. And what I found, at least in my life, is often there are some similarities. Maybe yours is more heavily focused on outward appearance, whereas God's going to be more focused on your inward heart. And so by doing both of those things, you can start to see where there are some overlap, and then you know where to focus, right? You know, where maybe there's even just some room to grow in your own health, faith, mindset, all of those things. And so I hope you like this episode. Let me know in the comments if you're going to try either of these activities, either the imagining your future self activity, where you just write down where you're going to be in a year's time, what you're going to look like, what you're going to be doing, what gets you excited, what your day routine is like, or if you're going to try the Dear God exercise, which is really my favorite. So let me know in the comments if you try any of those. I'd love to hear. And if you have any questions about me, my life, that you want me to answer in a future video, please let me know. I'm happy to do that. Okay, bye for now. I will see you in another video soon.